In this video, I'll be showing you guys how to make the simplest form of trouser you would ever see. So if you are one that you are interested in making pattern drafting, please like, share and subscribe to my channel so you can see more of these videos. So the first thing I'm going to do is to get my vertical lines, which is my waistline, my hip line, my crotch line, my knee line and my full length. Now after getting that, the next thing I'm going to do is to get my line. Now the border line it varies with how wide your hip is. If your hip is around 40 to 45, you can use 4 inches to 5 inches. Now if the person you are drafting for is a little big on the hip area, you can decide to use 6, 7 or 8 inches. Then if the person doesn't have much hip, maybe like 30 to 40, you can use 4 inches, but the lowest you can use is 4 inches. Now after getting my my borderline, I'm going to go ahead to measure my hip, my waist measurement, divide by 4. I'm going to go ahead and mark it. Then after marking, I'm also going to mark my hip, divide by 4. After marking my hip, divide by 4, I'm going to connect it with a straight line. Now this only applies to when you are making a fitted, if your waist is going to be fitted as your hip. Now if your hip is not as fitted as your waist, you can decide to use your hip measurements for your waist. Now in this case, I want it to be a little bit free, so that is the reason why I am using my hip divide by 4. I also added extra inches to it to make it free. So now I'm going to move to getting my crotch. Now to get a crotch, there are different formulas you can use to get a crotch, but the one I personally use is I'm going to divide my hip. I'll divide my hip by 4. Then I'll multiply it by 0.15 for the front. Now, whatever I get is what I'm going to use for the front. Now, after doing that, I'm going to get the crotch for the back so that we don't go back to it. Now, for the back, I'll also be using my hip divide by 4. Then I am multiplying by 0.45 instead of 0.15. So whatever I get, I'm going to write it down just as you can see. Now, just like I said, we have different methods to get our crotch, but this is the one that is most effective for me. So I'm going to do that and I'm going to set it aside for later. Then I'll continue drafting my trouser. Now whatever I got for the front, I'm going to mark it here now. So I got 1.5. So on that 1.5, I'll mark it on the crotch line, on the borderline area, and I'm going to mark it above on the borderline towards the hip, just as you can see, and I will connect it with a slant line. So after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to measure that line and connect it back to the crotch point, just as you can see. Now on that point, I'm going to come up by 0.75. Then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to connect it with a curved line from one point to another. That is how we are going to achieve our crotch for the front. Now, after doing that, the next thing that we are going to do is to get our crease line. Now, to get our crease line, we are going to divide the hip into two. The hip on the paper, on the pattern, into two, and mark it across the line. Now, after marking, I'm going to connect it with a straight line. Now, after doing that, after connecting with a straight line from the crotch, now the next thing I'm going to get is my knee circumference. I'm going to calculate my knee circumference. Now, to calculate my knee circumference, all I need is my knee circumference. Then I'm going to subtract 1 from it. That is knee circumference minus 1. Now, knee circumference minus 1, my knee is 18. So I'm going to subtract 1 from it, which will give us 17. Then I'm going to divide it by 4. So whatever I get, I'm going to mark it on each side of the crease line. If your final answer was 3, you measure 3 on one side and you measure 3 on the other side of your knee. Then you do the same thing for the length, the trouser length, or wherever you want your length to be. You measure whatever you got on each side of the crease line. So after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to connect with a straight line, just like you're seeing on the paper. I'm going to connect it from the length to the knee. Then from the knee, I'm going to connect it to the crotch cuff. That cuff that we got, the tip of the cuff, I'm going to connect it to it. Then for the other side, I'm going to connect it to the hip divide by 4 mark that we have initially. Now, technically, we already have our front trouser. This is going to serve as our front trouser. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is to get my back trouser using my back trouser pattern, using my front trouser pattern. Now, to do that, from the crotch line, I'm going to come down by 1/2 inch to get another crotch line for the back. Now, after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to measure my crotch. I'm going to measure my crotch. That is what we calculated earlier. I'm going to measure it. After measuring it on the new crotch line, I'm also going to measure it upward on the border line. Then I'll connect it with a slant line as seen in the video. Then, just like I did for the front crotch, I'm going to measure the slant line and divide it by 2 and indicate it. I'm going to mark it. Then on the new crotch line, I'm going to connect it with a slant line. From the new crotch point to the point that we divided by 2. Then on that slant line, I'm going to measure 1.9 inches. 1.9 inches. So on the 1.9 inches, I'll indicate it there. Then on the waistline, I'm going to connect it with a curved line. Now, the reason why I decided not to trace the back is because I am using elastic, like I said before. So what I did was, what you're supposed to do for a normal trouser, for a normal fitted trouser, is you're going to come in on that center line, the border line. You're going to come in by 1 inch. But because it is not a fitted trouser, I decided to leave it. So from the knee line, I'm going to measure 1/2 inch on each side of the knee line and connect it to the crotch line as seen. I'm also going to do the same thing as the length. Now, this 1/2 inch is the 1 inch that we deducted from our knee circumference. It is that 1 inch that we are adding back to the pattern at the back. And the reason why we are doing this is because most of the time the back is always bigger than the front. So in order to achieve that was why I removed the 1 inch. So as you can see, I already straightened my waist. I have added the exact measurements that I need. Now I'm going to go ahead and place a paper underneath to be able to trace out my back, or whichever one you want to trace out. So I'm tracing out the back, just like you can see here. I traced out the back. Then I'm going to go ahead on the new paper. I'm going to go ahead and draw out all the lines. Then on the first paper, I'm going to cut out the front. Don't forget that I've already drawn out the back before cutting out the front. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out the front pattern and the back pattern separately. So I already placed my pattern on my fabric. The and I'm going to go ahead to add my desired sewing allowance. I prefer to use 1 inch at the side and 1/2 inch at the inseam area. Now for the upper part, because I'm adding an elastic, I'm going to measure my elastic to know how many inches I'm going to add for my elastic allowance. Now I decided to use 2 inches. Now after doing that, I'm going to go ahead to cut out the front too. I'm going to mark my sewing allowance for the front and cut it out as seen. Now I'm done cutting. Now the next thing is to start sewing. So I'm going to go ahead. Now when sewing, you're going to first of all sew the inseam from the crotch to the hip. You're going to first of all join that. For both the front and the back. Now I've gone ahead to join all my trouser. Now after joining, the next thing I'm going to do is to sew out, to fold in my elastic allowance. If your material is one that needs ironing, then you need to iron, but this one does not need ironing, so that was the reason why I didn't bother to iron it. I've gone ahead to fold my elastic, and I've added my elastic. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to close the open parts. When sewing an elastic, you have to leave an opening, so in order for you to pass your elastic, and after sewing it, you close back. After adding your elastic, you close back the seam, you close back the elastic. Thank you guys for watching. I'm going to see you in the next one.